Hey, y'all, Pastor Emil here with another episode of Sweet Jesus. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is sweeter. We didn't have dinner yet, so we can't have dessert, maybe. Live from the Open Arms Podcast studio here with my friend Scott Lewis. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing to go through this book, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. Hope you are enjoying this. It's challenging. It's, I think, very helpful in a lot of ways. There's a lot of deep stuff here. We were just talking about this a little bit. I don't know that we're going to be able to unpack all of this here in this chapter, but there is a tremendous amount of helpful stuff. This is Rule 4. And Rule 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. What did you take away? What was your big takeaway? Or how do you find this to be helpful?
I think it's practical in a way that he gives like a simple method to actually do this kind of later in the chapter after he talks about, all the reasons why you're kind of a moron for doing the way you do. So that was good, I thought. And then, at the end, he even actually backs it up, I guess. I don't know. We'll let your expertise maybe get into that, but he does use some Bible verses, and is he using them correctly? I don't know. He always, I don't know if I should say, his angle on the Bible is psychological, and he says that. So it's not necessarily.
He's definitely got an interesting take on things. I can usually tell why he's saying that. Sometimes I think it's crazy. Sometimes it's not so crazy. In this case, he actually does a pretty good job in talking about the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think he's using what is a pretty stereotypical view of the Old Testament as like one type of God, and the New Testament is this other God, or like the Old Testament as law and the New Testament as grace. And he actually says that that's not right, but then uses that anyway to, But it is very interesting stuff. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And that is a terrible, terrible way to live life. And it's something that we are all so susceptible to. That's kind of where he starts out. And today with social media, I mean, you spend a few minutes scrolling on social media, you just see everybody's best, right? And then you're like, well, man, I'm a low-life piece of garbage. What?
Or boring, or
I'm boring. I'm not fun. I'm not taking care of my kids. I'm not a cool dad or mom, or, I'm not taking care of my body. I'm not good at my church or my job or whatever it is.
Taking nice vacations to these awesome places.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, that's why we are writing books, because we're not going to all the places we'd like to go to. You can help us get there. No, but that's like a creative way of we're traveling, and you can travel too without actually spending all that money, although there are ways to do it cheaper. Anyway. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. And he starts getting us off of this. It's really kind of interesting the way he starts out with this small town idea. I have actually said for a long time that, people that come, usually it was like people that grew up on farms is kind of what I said. But I think that would work with what he says at the beginning here. He says it was easier for people to be good at something when more of us lived in small rural communities. Someone could be homecoming queen, someone else could be spelling bee champ, math whiz, or basketball star. There were only one or two mechanics, a couple of teachers. In each of their domains, these local heroes had the opportunity to enjoy the serotonin-fueled confidence of the victor. It may be for that reason that people who were born in small towns are statistically overrepresented among the eminent. So people that are successful are those groups of people are overrepresented by people that grew up in rural communities, small rural communities. And in churches, especially like Lutheran churches, a lot of Midwesterners from small towns, farming communities, they are some of the most amazing people. Like they could, one guy, he was like the CFO for Kraft. Mm-hmm. And yet he could do anything. Like he wasn't just an accountant.
Right.
Like he built stuff and he just knew how to do so many things. And just the grit and the perseverance, like so many other people wilt under the pressures of life. Like, oh man, life is hard. I want to quit. Like they just don't, they're just, it's just such a wide knowledge base, wide experience base, white collar people doing blue collar stuff around the house. Like just an interesting mix, very dedicated, very faithful, very hardworking, great character. And he is saying that this has a lot to do with the fact that they didn't have to compare themselves to anybody else. Mm. Like if you grew up in a city, you have millions of other people to compare yourselves to. There's not just one of you that's good in a certain area or certain areas. There's 20 or 10,000 and you don't stand out. You're medium-sized fish in an enormous pond. Medium-sized fish in a small pond looks like a giant fish, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, and then you add, of course, the fact that we have become digitally connected to the entire 7 billion population of the planet. And so our hierarchies of accomplishment are now dizzyingly vertical, he says, right? So no matter how good you are at something or how you rank your accomplishment, there is someone out there who makes you look incompetent. Such a way with words here. I
always thought we started, and this may be a little bit off, but I thought we started to maybe go down the wrong path when that television show Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous came out back in, was it the 80s or was it the 90s? I don't know when it was.
Maybe late 80s, early 90s, yeah.
Because, before that, I didn't know what any particular rich person was doing for vacations or, unless you saw it in a movie or something. But then it was a movie, so you just assumed it was all fictional, for the most part, whatever. So, yeah, and then you start seeing all that, and it's like, well, man, these people are really doing things that I'm not doing. What do I got to do that?
What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, so, yeah.
Well, and there's a lot of stuff out there just generally about contentment and financial contentment. I watched, I think it was a YouTube short a while back, and this woman is saying that, you're more likely to be content and financially successful if you're surrounded by people that are at where you're at or a little bit lower. So if you make $50,000 a year or $40,000 a year, but you're surrounded by people that all make $50,000 a year, you're going to feel like dirt. And you're going to constantly try to stretch to be in those types of things. But if you make $40,000 a year and you're surrounded by people that make $30,000 a year, you're going to feel like a king. You're going to feel like, I got it pretty good. But what happens when it's not just about who you associate with, but like you said, like I can see on TV now, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Kids today don't want to be doctors, lawyers, and teachers. They want to be YouTubers. They want to be famous and rich and software developers. They want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg or something, Mm-hmm. So that was you?
No, I didn't. I'm older than Zuckerberg, but I wanted, I am a software developer, but it's like, yeah, look at me and my career. And then Look at Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, or whatever. It's like, man, I just really stink at my job, I guess.
Well, and that's what he's getting at. We have this tendency to compare ourselves to the top of the top, the cream of the crop, right? It's and it's not helpful. You had mentioned, I don't know if we were already live or if it was before we got on, the idea of this Pareto distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know all the technical terms, but a Pareto distribution is not like a standard distribution. I don't know what the right phrase is for that, but like a bell curve distribution where
Right.
most of the people are kind of in the middle or what. But a Pareto distribution is the opposite of that most of the people are at the bottom, and as you go up, sort of, you get higher and higher rates of accomplishment or something like that.
Yeah.
This idea that 20% of customers are 80% of the money, or 20% of employees are 80% of the work. But he says it's even higher than that. It's more like 10% and 90%, I think, is what he may have said. Maybe not in the book, but there was also a video that we watched about this, kind of summarizing this chapter. You can find on YouTube. But the people that have the songs, the books, the goals scored, wealth, it is distributed unevenly.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the world is rife with inequality. It is inevitable. And we don't know what to do about it because the cure is often worse than the disease. So, like, a lot of times people want to help redistribute wealth. Like, why is it that there's so much wealth collecting in just these few people, these few companies, these few, all this kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the Pareto distribution. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. It just happens. And when we try to fix it, it just gets worse.
Yeah, I know a few people that play music for a living, and they're not doing anywhere near what Taylor Swift is doing right now.
Yeah, and she just keeps getting better and making more money and selling more tickets and albums and whatever, like.
You could even be a fairly successful musician and
Yeah.
look at her and go, oh.
I was trying to think of an example of like a pretty successful. I mean, I would say she's probably at the top. Like, you could take.
Yeah, I think right now she probably is the top
earner, the top number one hits, the top, concert attendee, ticket sales, endorsements. I mean, I'm sure
she
that
can
she's
fill up
raking
Wembley
it in.
Stadium. 5 nights or something? That's 100,000 people, or was it 10 nights? I think I saw on the news.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's 100,000 people. So that's 500,000 people that are paying
Thousands of dollars. Those tickets are not cheap.
So yeah, that's how she gets to the top. But you can't be. I guess what he says is also is that you can't focus on that, and because you don't know what she might be perfectly fine. I don't know her personally, but because they could be terrible people.
Yeah. Well, and he actually goes into that. He talked, well, what are the ways that you can deal with this without descending into hopelessness and nihilism and just, nothing matters. I don't matter. How do you do that? Well, he talks about how there was this attempt to deal with that by basically coming up with positive illusions, he said. What but willful blindness could possibly shelter people from such withering criticism? It is for such reasons that a whole generation of social psychologists recommended positive illusions as the only reliable route to mental health. Their credo, let a lie be your umbrella. A more dismal, wretched, pessimistic philosophy can hardly be imagined. Things are so terrible that only delusion can save you. He's really got away with words.
Cuts you right to the hurt.
He does. But that's basically just lie to yourself. I'm pretty good, right? Or he gives another alternative approach, and that's what you were getting at. This idea that there are people that are better, but their lives are kind of miserable, or but this is just an unhelpful path to be on, to compare ourselves to other people.
I mean, we just watched the Olympics, right, for the last couple of weeks. I mean, your son swims. So I asked him, I said, so was there any of your swim times close to anybody on male or female? And he kind of went, yeah, maybe there might have been somewhere, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember the details, but I said, well, good. That's good. That means if you're,
So their times are all in meter pools.
So it's got to convert.
So if you take the short course times, the yard times, he's got some that are pretty close, but he's not.
I don't know if he did the math.
No, I don't know either of it. Yeah, it's very significant. And then you see it even there, like you have these few athletes that continue to come back and win. Like you got the Michael Phelpses of the world, the Katie Ledeckis, that just rack up the medals. Simone Biles, they just keep winning and keep improving and keep succeeding. And his solution sort of to this is like basically, take stock of yourself. And stop comparing yourself to everybody else, but just figure out the thing that you can do. What can you do? And you can make small, minor improvements. And there's a phrase, he didn't use this, but, I've heard it many times. People overestimate what they can accomplish in 6 months to a year, but underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years or 10 years. So it's these little things that if you just keep plugging away little bit by little bit and trying to become better than you were yesterday, that incremental improvement will astound you later on. And that's, shameless plug once again, but that's the idea with our books, right? I mean, we live in very real set of challenging times for the church, for ministry. And I know I get caught up in like just the overwhelming enormity of the challenge that, people are just not interested in church, not interested in the institutional side of it. Maybe Jesus is cool and, hanging out with some friends here and there that are Christians and doing some Christian things and service type things. That's cool. But, I don't really want to support a building or staff or turning lights on or all this other kind of stuff. I don't want to do that. And, of course, financially difficult times, inflation, all kinds of stuff affecting that. And we said, a number of years ago, well, we didn't want to be beholden to that. We want to be able to do this no matter what is going on in the world or with the church. God's up to something. It's transforming everything. And then you start going, oh, well, that's this enormous task. And it was overwhelming. And when we got started, it was very much like a frantic thing, although there was no way we were going to solve it overnight. But then finally, when we just kind of stepped back and we said, no, we can't solve it overnight, but we can over the next 10 years maybe. And let's do a book a year. And so we got the first one, and then we got the second one. And actually this year we had two, if you count but I had a lot of help with this one, the Open Arms Connecting People to Jesus. Sorry about the glare there. It's not really. But that was a collaborative effort. Now we got to get the third one going. We're late. We're behind the ball here. And then the fourth one, and then and maybe there's other things we can do. Paying down debt, right? This is another thing. You got a big amount of debt. This is Dave Ramsey type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You just start. And actually, the way he recommends is not by picking the one with the greatest interest rate. He says you pick the one with the smallest debt amount, total amount, so that you succeed sooner. Like you get one thing paid off and you go, yeah. And that it's so that incremental, I would say that falls in line kind of this, like just the smallest step. Yeah, you're not paying off the 20% one, but you're paying off the 6% or the 8%. But it's gone. And then the snowball idea goes to the next debt. And that one maybe is the higher interest rate, but you've already succeeded. You've tasted that. And that's actually this Pareto distribution. You succeed and more people then begin to provide you with more opportunities. It's just the way it is. You can't fight it. You do to your own detriment. It's
the 80-20 rule is another name for it, I think.
80-20 rule, yeah.
And it can be applied across all types of things as far as the Pareto principle goes, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's like it's built in. It's almost like it's built into the universe, some type of
like Fibonacci sequence, right? Like those numbers, those ratios.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a law of the universe. So don't fight it. The S&P 500 is supposedly, the 500 largest publicly traded companies in America. And I don't remember the stats on this exactly, but up until a little while ago, the S&P had done pretty well for the year. August was not great.
No.
But things have bounced back quite a bit. But the S&P had this, 17%, I think, gain for the year. But of that gain, the Magnificent Seven, the top companies, the largest companies, Microsoft, Apple, NVIDIA, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Tesla, not so much until recently. But these companies made up something like, 30, 40, 50% of that gain. And then if you just took those 7 companies, you'd have done a lot better than if you had the whole 500. Of course, that's meant to diversify and shield you from fluctuations and risk and all that kind of stuff. But this is not financial advice. It's just making a point that the success breeds success. It is what it is. And maybe this actually came up in the previous chapter, and I don't know if we talked about it. We didn't prepare as much for that one, kind of last minute. But I think that's where he talked about like a team. Like you would think that if you had somebody who was underperforming and you put them on a team with great people, that they would get better. But actually, the opposite happens. When you add a dysfunctional person to a successful team, it destroys the team. Right? It's just like, what? Just stay away from, let them go. You're going to screw it up. Don't. And I think that's what he's saying about how every attempt to try to fix these distributions, this Pareto distribution idea, just ends up making a mess of things.
I think he went into communism and socialism, and
which is one of his major fields of he's an expert on it,
right?
Essentially,
right. Yeah. Oh, that's a total disaster, and how many people literally died under that, so
not just died, but the incredible economic suicide that it was.
Right.
Like it actually eroded overall wealth. But there's actually another YouTube short I saw. I think it was Jordan Peterson, and I forget why. He was making some comment on Elon Musk's idea of, we have to fight this overpopulation myth, the depopulation crisis.
Right.
Elon Musk is on this, that's one of his many things. And Jordan Peterson, somebody asked him about it. And he said something like, well, yeah, you have more people. It takes more resources. And there were very specific numbers he was using. But then he said, but every person actually generates 70 times the number of resources that they consume. And that's probably why there's remarkably more wealth today than when he was born. Right? So, like, there's technological advances, there's efficiencies, there's improvements in the way
Grow food.
we grow food and produce things, and all of that, it actually like creates wealth. So a lot of this stuff has really made me feel more strongly than ever. Capitalism. Not that we have pure capitalism. We have corporate welfare in many cases.
Right.
But this idea that there is a way to manufacture wealth, like it just sort of, like somehow God, right? Don't worry. Luke chapter 12, right? God's going to take care of you, just like He takes care of the birds of the air and everything. I don't know. What do you think about all that? That I don't even know where that was going. That just sort of randomly, that was a minor tangent.
Yeah, I just thought about when I was reading that, when he compared yourself, to who you were yesterday, in computer science or software development, you have something, a table or an array. And for some reason, I guess because that's the way I think about things, I pictured myself, at, sub 1, and then tomorrow will be sub 2, or, maybe today sub 2, yesterday was sub 1, sub 3 will be tomorrow. I can look at myself in each one of those days, and then I can actually compare myself. It's like I'm not just one person. I think he uses this in some other videos that he has. I am multiple people. I am the me that I was yesterday, the me I am today, and the who I'm going to be tomorrow,
yeah,
kind of thing. So, trying to look at yesterday, who I was yesterday, and be better than that today, then tomorrow I should be able to look back and see that I've, done something that was successful. And it just builds from there, like you were saying.
There's this guy, some military Navy SEAL instructor maybe, or, make your bed.
Right.
You ever see that video? It's made the rounds. Every once in a while it comes back up again.
Yeah, I think he gave it at a graduation.
Commencement speech, yeah. Somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but make your bed. Just make your bed. Because then if you come home at the end of the day and everything else you failed miserably at least you can say you made your bed. Yeah. And there's some truth to that. And the truth is, though, that you will have definitely done more than just make your bed. You've accomplished something, right? And I think he's just trying to help people be intentional. But the bulk of what takes place in the following pages after he kind of gets everything started is sort of like he's giving you, years worth of counseling in a few pages as sort of a detached, non-observer observer. So he's like an observer of human behavior and humanity. And he's got all this insight and wisdom and psychological knowledge that he is, I think, trying to share in, an impersonal way, but in a way that, for me, was really helpful. Let me see. So he spends a lot of time talking about this internal critic within us. Like, we all have this internal critic. It's page 89 of my version, which doesn't appear to be like a new edition or anything. But he says, when the internal critic puts you down using such comparisons, here's how it operates. First, it selects a single arbitrary domain of comparison, fame maybe, or power. then it acts as if that domain is the only one that is relevant. Then it contrasts you unfavorably with someone truly stellar within that domain. It can take that final step even further, using the unbridgeable gap between you and its target of comparison as evidence for the fundamental injustice of life. That way, your motivation to do anything at all can be most effectively undermined. Those who accept such an approach to self-evaluation certainly can't be accused of making things too easy for themselves, but it's just as big a problem to make things too difficult. And then he goes into this whole thing about like the truth. Maybe I swear I had that underlined where, well, you got to speak the truth essentially to yourself, and it may not be easy to say it, but essentially we're basically going through life lying to ourselves about all kinds of stuff. And if we can stop those lies, we can actually begin to kind of get to where we need to be. And he's talking about, he uses this gorilla experiment, which he's not the only one. I mean, I've heard that used quite a bit, where like there are these people in white shirts and these people in black shirts, and they're passing this ball, and they take it on video, or they have people, I think it's on video, and they have people watch it, and they tell them count the number of times they pass the ball, and then they finish the video and they say, okay, how many times? They give them a number, and they say, but did you see the gorilla? And they go, what gorilla? And so they have this guy in a gorilla suit go behind them and pass right by, or maybe right in front of them, right in front of the camera. But they're so busy counting that they don't even notice the gorilla. And his point is that we're not always looking at the right thing. So we feel like we're stuck, but it's because we're not looking at the right thing. We're looking for the wrong thing, and being honest with ourselves is really important, so that we can start looking at the right things and start challenging us and pointing ourselves in the right direction, make those incremental changes, here we go. So page 90, 91, talks about your responsibility, like this idea of should. Sometimes we get caught up in, well, this is what we should want. This is what we should do. And he says, should is your responsibility, and you should live up to it. But this does not mean you must take the role of lapdog, obedient and harmless. That's how a dictator wants his slaves. Again, all that studying of Russia, communism, and all kinds of other tyrannical regimes in history, 20th century in particular. He says, dare instead to be dangerous. Dare to be truthful. And that comes up. There's another chapter about the truth. Dare to be truthful. Dare to articulate yourself and express, or at least become aware of, what would really justify your life. If you allowed your dark and unspoken desires for your partner, for example, to manifest themselves, if you were even willing to consider them, you might discover that they were not so dark given the light of day. You might discover instead that you were just afraid, and so pretending to be moral. You might find that getting what you actually desire would stop you from being tempted and straying. And he actually spent some time in another future chapter, I think, about like an adulterous guy and the wife, and he breaks apart that relationship, takes it back to like a 30,000 foot view, and all kinds of stuff about speaking the truth. Are you so sure that your partner would be unhappy if more of you rose to the surface? Right? And so like there's this sense that why don't we have what we want? Because we're not actually willing to say it. We're more willing to sort of keep the peace and avoid confrontation at all costs. And then he says, the femme fatale and the anti-hero are sexually attractive for a reason. This is like, I think he's getting at like the bad guy. Chicks dig bad guys, so why are you always so nice to them? That's, I think, what he's kind of getting at. So how do you need to be spoken to? What do you need to take from people? What are you putting up with or pretending to like from duty or obligation? Consult your resentment. It's a revelatory emotion for all its pathology. It's part of an evil triad: arrogance, deceit, and resentment. Nothing causes more harm than this underworld trinity. But resentment always means one of two things. Either the resentful person is immature, in which case he or she should shut up, quit whining, and get on with it, or there is tyranny afoot, in which case the person subjugated has a moral obligation to speak up. This was like such a huge section here for me. Why? Because the consequence of remaining silent is worse. Of course, it's easier in the moment to stay silent and avoid conflict, but in the long term, that's deadly. When you have something to say, silence is a lie, and tyranny feeds on lies. When should you push back against oppression despite the danger? When you start nursing secret fantasies of revenge, when your life is being poisoned and your imagination fills with the wish to devour and destroy. And he goes into this story about one of his former clients, very OCD, and he says, close your eyes, let it all out. Let that person in your, how does he say here? Let that part of you say what it wants. Close your eyes, let it out. Don't let fear stop you. You don't have to act it out just because you're thinking it. He says, it wants me to take my stepfather by the collar, put him up against the door, and shake him like a rat. So it's like these inner things that we have been convinced to believe are that are necessary, are somehow boxing us in, but then we end up in this, untenable, like, I can't, no, there's no longer sort of thing.
Built a jail that you're living in.
You built your own jail. That's right. That's right. And he's saying, so if you're at that point, you got to start being honest with yourself, with the people around you. And, if you're nursing those sorts of things, it ain't good. And you are morally justified in expressing, like, this is back to earlier too, right? Like, treat yourself like someone you should be, that you're in charge of helping, right? And when you help yourself, you're helping other people around you in a lot of ways.
And don't hold it in to explode.
Yeah.
And it comes out badly, and you look like the lunatic, right?
Well, because you would be essentially the lunatic at that point, so you got to let it out. Yeah,
that's when he was saying, I think, in there about, maybe pick the task of cleaning your desk, but then, in that pile of papers, there may be snakes hidden. He uses the symbol of snakes, as something where, an evil thing that we're always going against.
Yeah.
Kind of biblical, I guess. Snakes, dragons.
Certainly snakes are the imagery, yeah.
Yeah, so, So, maybe there's some bills that you should be paying on your desk or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what the snakes would be on your desk.
The one we left behind that I had you break into our house to get? Yeah. I
didn't think about it that. Maybe that was a Freudian.
Yeah, no, I was like, oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just start small. Start tackling something. There's a lot of stuff out there about cleanliness that sort of, who's this, like Marie Kondo? Was she was the one, if it doesn't give you joy, get rid of it. Like,
right.
Minimalist type person, and lots of other people. Like, just clean up your kind of little corner of the world, or or if you can't clean up your own bedroom, like, don't start trying to take over the world. That might be a rule in the second book, actually.
Is it?
Is
it in there?
I don't know. I got that one.
That's one he uses. I lose track of where some of his.
Oh yes, rule 6 is coming up. Set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Right. So, what's the little thing that you can do today or tomorrow? And what if you did a little bit more of it each day, or you got a little better at it each day? exercise, take care of yourself physically, clean stuff up, make your bed. He's got something he talks a lot about, get up at the same time every day.
Mm-hmm.
Does that come out? Has that come out in one of the rules yet? Or is it?
I don't know.
I think he said it's like one of the.
I heard it in one of his other podcasts.
It's like one of the few things that he tells people if their life is really like a mess. He's like, get up at the same time every day and see what happens. Like, just pick the time, get up the same time every day. And he's like, you'd be surprised how much is fixed just by telling people to do that. So.
Yeah, and he says the way, because I listened to him talk to somebody about that, and the person was saying, yeah, I've been trying, I need to get more sleep, more rest. And he says, so I've been trying to go to bed at just, a certain time. He says, no, don't do that. Set your wake up time the same every day. And no matter what time you go to bed, just make sure you wake up at that same time. And then I guess that's a better, if you didn't get much sleep and you still wake up at 6 a.m. and then go through a whole day, you ain't going to make it till late at night. Unless you take a lot of naps.
Yeah.
In which case, maybe there's some other issues there.
Yeah. Well, I did read something about naps being very good for you.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
Yep.
So maybe that's maybe better is to wake up early and take a nap.
Right.
And then whatever when you go to sleep,
Yeah.
Take a bay, as we call them around here.
Well, they said before electricity, or was it before? Yeah, I guess it would have been before electricity. I'm trying to think of the
2
time.
sleeps?
Yeah, you go to sleep, and then they would wake up in the middle of the night and do stuff, and then they would go back to get bed and sleep some more, and then wake up.
Yeah, because before electricity, your body naturally wants to go to sleep when the sun is going down, or earlier. Like your body's once it gets a certain amount of sunlight, it's kind of ready. And then when you go to sleep, especially in the winter months, it tends to be darker for a really long period of time. And you don't have electricity sort of messing with your body's rhythm. But people would wake up after like 4.5, 5 hours, and they would, do some things, and then they would go back to sleep for another few hours and then wake up for the day. And that's how you wake up at the crack of dawn, when you're going to bed
That seems bizarre. When I read that, it seems bizarre. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I actually do that sometimes but not on purpose, Wake up at 2 a.m. going, okay, now what am I gonna do? So a lot of times I'll go read.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm contributing it to some form of insomnia, but maybe it's just more of a natural rhythm that
it
hitting
can be.
Or something. Maybe, I don't know.
It can be, but all this false lighting doesn't really help. It kind of messes with us. More of God's natural thing.
But do you think? Okay, so you pick your thing that you're going to do every day. So say you're going, let's make it exercise. That's kind of easy. So, you want to start you're going to start walking more, because they say, I read something recently that people that walk 8,000 steps a day are 50% less likely to die for any reason. It's just that's where the statistics fall, I think.
Like 50% less likely to die that day or that year or that ever.
Yeah, just going on, right? Eventually you can't
gonna
make 8,000 steps.
Yeah, you're gonna die at some point.
You're gonna be that less than 50%, I guess, at some point. But yeah. Anyway, I thought, okay, so anyway, so you get up every day. I'm gonna start taking more steps, right? So go walking more. So you do that, and then you think, oh wow, I can do this, and I'm a person that I like to log it. So I think that would be okay according to what he's saying. Okay, Monday I did this many or whatever. Okay, Tuesday I'm going to try to do whatever, and I like to log it. Then I like to go back and look at the log. Ooh, look what I did, which is, I think, okay. But then I know I got to the point where if I didn't do so well, I was really bummed out about it. You know what I mean? I was kind of living off I guess it's a little serotonin hit that you get from accomplishing something. So you think it can be, there's always like either end, extremes of things, right? Yeah. So I guess you can even take this to a bit of an extreme.
Absolutely. I mean, we are constantly constantly our own worst critic. And it can become, that accomplishment thing can become a master of sorts, like a taskmaster, a slave driver, right? I mean, gym rats, right? That just absolutely have to, and hey, it's great and they look great, but I mean, those guys are spending way too much time at the gym. Like, oh, I'm on my fourth wife, and I have, like, yeah, I wonder why. What the heck are you doing here 4 hours a day? Don't you have a job? Yeah, I work a lot of hours. I make all this, like, well, then, like, yeah.
Yeah, so even like the watch that I have, I won't plug a brand, but I've used different ones, but the one I got now, and you can turn some of these things on and off, but I think for whatever reason, I don't know if it's based upon, the 8,000 steps but even though I've changed that recently, it still seems to tell me, it gives me a little notification, that it wants me to get 250 steps in an hour. And so it pops up saying, if you got, 150 steps left to go and you've got like 15 minutes,
Yeah.
So, I mean,
well, it's human psychology. It's trying to get you. My watch does stuff like that, and
little reminders,
it's helpful. Like, it's maybe wearing off a little bit because I've had it a while now, and you go enough without doing those things.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, or you forget to log it, or you don't turn it on to measure it. Like if you're doing an actual workout of some kind, or it's charging, so you're not wearing it while you're,
right.
Those psychological factors maybe wear off a little bit, but
I tell you what, though, it can be hard.
It gets you going, yeah.
Because I'm the kind of person that I get out in the middle of a walk or a run, and it's like, I didn't put my watch on.
I'm not going to get that, Sarah.
I'm not going to get credit from my stupid watch,
Yeah.
Like I'm almost a prisoner to my watch.
Well,
so at one point I actually said, okay, they call it in running, going naked. So you don't bring any electronic devices with you. No music, no watches, no GPSs, nothing. You got your shoes on and clothes, of course, but electronically naked, I guess, and I had to do that for a while. I had to just no, I'm not recording this today. I'm going to be fine. Because it almost was, too much. But now I'm back to the other thing where I need to be reminded every day.
So addicted to accomplishment.
Yeah.
But, let's talk Jesus for a moment here. We haven't really done that. He kind of gets at this a little bit. This idea that, we can become a little too self-righteous, if we can put it that way, that we are the ones making ourselves righteous. If you are the one making yourself righteous, yes, this whole thing can be an absolute trap, a downward spiral of accomplishment, and you get addicted to it, and you get addicted to being good and doing good, and not just good, but but trying to be perfect. And then you need to hear the law. You need to hear the truth. You need to hear what he talks about. He kind of divides Old Testament and New Testament. I kind of mentioned that. Or he at least says that this is a common way that people view it, but he doesn't necessarily agree with that. But then he uses it to make his point. It's like, so let's say you need, if you're addicted to that, then you need to have the perfect standard held up to your face. You need the true judge, the perfect judge, to come down and say, you ain't perfect and you ain't even close. Just to sort of shake you out of that self-confidence. But then, of course, Jesus is, hey, yeah, you're a screw up just like the rest of us, but I still love you, and I have a future for you, and that future is going to be better than what it is now, and you're going to be incrementally better, but never really not a sinner.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to, even when you do right, you're going to be doing it all wrong. You're doing right, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. Just everything you do, everything you touch is so contaminated with sin. Don't you get it? That's why I came and died. And, so there's real like wake up call as to the level of imperfection. But then also this like, hey, but I love you. Like there is something of value here. And man, this future is going to be amazing. The kingdom of God's begun. This transformation has begun. But it's never going to be complete until you see me again face to face. It's not until you see me face to face. 1 John 3 talks about, we're God's children now and what we will be. We don't yet know, but we know that when we see him, we'll be like him. And anyone who thus hopes purifies himself as he is pure. So it's like, it's not that you are purifying yourself necessarily, but that it's that hope of the ultimate purification one day, and the confidence that in Christ we are pure enough for eternity, that we are, perfect because Jesus' perfection, his righteousness becomes our righteousness. That's the good-o-meter video we did a while back, like all these people coming into the gates of heaven and standing on this
Is it a
scale.
good-o-meter or is it a goodometer?
Goodometer? Maybe.
I don't know. I'm just
squirrel.
Yeah.
Goodometer. Maybe. Goodometer. Goodometers.
Is it a speedometer or is it a speedometer?
Speedometer. Oh my God. Goodometer. That sounds weird too.
Yeah, it does.
But whatever, they're walking in and they're standing on this thing and it's measuring their goodness, whether they make it in, and every one of them is not good enough. And then this one guy comes up and they open up his folder and they're like, man, this guy's a train wreck. You ain't making it. And before he steps on the scale, Jesus comes and like puts his arm up and keeps him from getting on, and takes away that one folder with all of his bad deeds and then gives him his folder. I forget what it says on the one piece of paper that's in there. He's with me, or paid for by Jesus.
Paid in full.
Paid in full, yeah, something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
And so he stands on the scale, right? And so this righteousness of Christ, his perfection, is our perfection now. And when we stand before God on Judgment Day, it's that perfection of Jesus that he sees, and we are allowed to enter in. And then by entering into this new heaven, new earth, new creation, eternity, and seeing Jesus face to face purifies us. Like we become who we were in Christ, we become now fully. And the old sinner, like dross, it's Old Testament, like metals, you melt gold, you melt silver. They called it dross, as the imperfections like that. That's the moment where the dross, the imperfections, the impurities are burned off. And we are actually who we truly can be, who God always knew we could be, who we were never going to be this side of eternity. But that hope keeps us pressing on, because we don't have to. And yet, how can you not for somebody that did what they did?
Was it Holy Spirit starts a good work in you that you won't see perfected until. So I guess, yeah.
I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. So he's bringing it to completion, but we're not going to see completion until one day. And that paradigm really should give us the boldness and the courage to step out. So Paul, I forget where it is exactly. I want to say maybe it's 1 Corinthians 4. He talks about this idea of, being stewards of the mysteries of God. And then right after that, he's kind of like addressing critics. And he goes into this thing where he's like, you know what? I don't care what you think about me.
Mm-hmm.
But then he says, I don't even care what I think about me. And then he says, well, it's not because like I'm innocent. It's just there's only one person who's going to judge, and he's going to judge on the last day. And I'm confident essentially of what that outcome is going to be. So Paul has this humility to look at himself honestly, which is a big part of what's going on here. Be honest about yourself. Pay attention to the right things, not the wrong things. But then be bold enough to press on and to move into that new future. You got to figure out what that new future is for you. Like, how is God, what is God calling you to do? How is he pushing you and prodding you and shaping and molding you? And why are you just sitting there stagnant, being miserable?
Yeah, I guess so. That's what they call this still small voice is telling you get up and make your bed and or whatever your task is for the day. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, and so many of us are stuck in like there's just a general malaise. We're just way too blessed.
Yeah.
We got it way too good. And we've had it way too good for way too long. And now things are like sort of getting tougher for some, for a lot maybe. And we're just going, instead of
digging in and doing something about it, right? Yeah, well, what's the saying I've heard a few times over the last year or so, whatever it's been. And this is gives the, I guess, the credit to men, but it says, hard men make good times.
Good times make bad men.
Weak men.
Weak
men and weak men make bad times. So that's the loop.
Yeah.
So we might be headed into where the bad men or the weak men making the bad times, and
yeah,
before it gets better again. And what is it about? More people are saved during, difficult times. They're more,
Yeah, people care a lot more about eternal things when the present is clearly limited. And all the things, there's an expression, Tim Keller used to use this a lot. You never realize Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you have.
Right.
And that's why some of the most joyful people in the world are people that have nothing but Jesus. I've been in Haiti, Guatemala, some really remote, impoverished places, and I was part of a group of churches that kind of funded the building of a church, essentially. It wasn't just a church. It was like a community thing, but was used for a church as well as some other things. And, man, they did this worship service. It was unbelievable, just the joy.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like anything fancy. I mean, they don't have the kind of bells and whistles that we got. And we don't even have nearly what other people have got, other churches have got. And that could not compare to just walking through this village and seeing these people and talking to a mom who, wasn't sure whether she should starve herself or one of her kids, and going through a torrential downpour the night before, having to sleep in someone else's hut because the water just washed out the bottom of their little area that they had, and they have joy, and we have the most miserable people on the planet.
Yeah, there was a pastor, I think it was in China, he said, and he would meet these people in like a remote village somewhere, and these people would travel for miles and miles, walking whatever they could do to get there. And they didn't have copies of the Bible, but whatever, like not each of them, but what they had, they memorized to do, to do the service or whatever. And so I think at one point after that pastor had, finished, they said, well, hopefully one day we will be like you, like in America, we'll be like you. And he just kind of went like, no, hopefully one day in America, we will be like you, who will travel this many miles, memorize what you need to memorize because you don't have it. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. The story about some woman in North Korea, she basically knew 1st and 2nd Peter, and she had it memorized because that was what was available to her while she was in prison. Just unbelievable. So there's a quote that I forget if it was in the video, in the chapter. I know he's used it many times. He who has a why can bear almost any how.
Oh, right.
And so really, you need a why in order to get yourself to that incremental change, and not just this complete hopelessness and nihilism that comes with only being able to see these incredible accomplishments and going, well, I'm never going to do that. He joked about Elon Musk in the video.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, yeah, I remember this one guy who was just so down on himself, and he was really actually pretty amazing. But my roommate, I feel like I'm such a loser, And he's like, well, who's your roommate? And he's like, oh, Elon Musk. He's like, well, of course you feel like crap. It's Elon Musk, the world's richest man or close to it, back and forth a little bit. And all these just phenomenal companies doing amazing things that the full, I really shouldn't get into this, but full self-driving that they've been working on. I got to demo drive a Tesla. That thing is pretty darn good. It's not a joke anymore. Personally, that's my...
So that wasn't the self-drive part, just the driving of the car itself.
No, full, you can turn on this full self-driving beta, which is technically still supposed to be supervised, so you're in the seat. But did a pretty good job. Pretty darn good job. The only thing was like getting back to the place was, it wasn't laid out right, and it just didn't know the map, and it was complete chaos. Too many cars there. So that was the only thing it couldn't handle, was like getting back into the parking lot, because it didn't know where the entrance was, which honestly was hard for me when I first showed up. But
yeah, I thought it was pretty amazing a few years ago when they had the car that would parallel park. You just pulled up alongside the car in front, hit the button, it would back you in. Like, that's crazy.
I didn't try parking, but it was pretty impressive what I did see it do. So if you compare yourself to a guy like that who's revolutionizing technology and driving, and you're gonna feel pretty crummy. But
yeah, you got to look at your own gifts, what your abilities are,
and your little place in the world.
Yeah.
And yes, the people at the top are making some pretty big transformational changes, but I think Jesus makes a pretty big point repeatedly that it's little things. The kingdom of God isn't like something that's big and, powerful up at the top and just imposes on everyone else. The kingdom of God is something that works on the hearts of men and women in Christ and springs up from the bottom. People doing little things every day to push back against the malaise and the decay and the evil, the nihilism, the hopelessness. We just do these little things every day, and somehow that changes the world.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 13, I forget the exact verse. There's a whole bunch of parables in there, but there's a short one in there that says, the kingdom of God is like a woman who had a little leaven, and she kneaded it into some dough until it went through the whole lump. And that's it. So the kingdom of God is this little stuff you can't even hardly see. You put it in to this dough, and then all of a sudden it just takes over, and it just makes it something different that's usable, that you can do stuff with.
Mm.
So don't set your sights on all this ridiculous, crazy, maybe unrealistic for you, but not, not maybe insignificant stuff, but stuff that it's not something you're going to do, but there is something you can do. You got a neighbor somewhere. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Find a neighbor somewhere. Be a good neighbor. Tackle whatever it is that God's put right in front of you. You're probably looking past it like the gorilla. It's right there, but you're too busy
counting other things.
looking at the Elon Musks of the world and going, well, why can't I,
Mm-hmm.
And you could probably change the world for someone, certainly yourself, but also for a lot of other people if you just focused on what was right in front of you. Your kids. Change the world. Your kids don't stick around for very long, right? I mean, you're kind of in that stage.
Yes.
We still got them, but, man, not for much longer.
It goes by fast.
So.
It does.
Love your spouse, your kids.
It goes by fast one day at a time. So you got to do these each day things, right? Otherwise you look back and you think, well, what did I do? You didn't do anything because you didn't get up on Monday and do that thing that you were supposed to do with them or whatever it was, Yep. And at times you complain about taking them to practice. It's like, you get to take them to practice, At least you're there with them, watching them.
Mm.
You're involved in their lives. So I don't know. Hopefully it has an effect.
Well, we'll see.
Yep.
We'll see. Did we successfully beat this thing to death without?
There's a lot in there, but yeah, I think we hit it.
There's a lot in there that. Read the chapter. You'll get a whole lot more out of it, as far as the thinking through your own personal, like where you're at and where you maybe need to be going. But it does build. Each of these chapters, each of these rules kind of work together. We every time we've talked about, oh yeah, well, what about that previous chapter? Oh yeah, but it's coming in this next one, and there is a lot of interplay. So hopefully each one will do something to add to it. But any final comments?
I think I'm good.
Shameless plug. Nobody's Nola, Tales of Nola, Open Arms. What did you have? You were going to say something before? No?
Looking at your books.
All right. Sell. You're helping transform the church and ministry as we tackle a brave new world, a scary new world, but one where God is, and He's got some exciting plans. We just have no idea what things are going to look like.
Scary.
So,
sometimes, yeah.
All right, y'all. Great to see you. Great to be with you. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet, but Jesus is far sweeter.
Give us some. Yay, all right.
Give us some of that.
He said reward yourself.